Happy Sunday to you all, my dear friends. On this fifth Sunday of Lent, year C, the readings invite us to always remember that God is not concerned about our past life. Rather, God shows more concern to our present and also our future life. In the first reading from the prophet Isaiah, the prophet reminds us that everything that has been in the past is gone, that behold, God is going to make new things, right? And also in the gospel, we see how this woman who was accused of adultery was brought before Jesus. What is the setting of this whole scenario? Jesus came down from the mountain where he went to pray, and then he went to the temple area where he was surrounded by his disciples, right? Those who were listening to him, how he was teaching. And then he brought this woman who was caught in adultery. But we asked ourselves, where was the man? Because we cannot commit adultery alone. It must be a man and a woman normally, right? So they brought in and asked Jesus to tempt Jesus, right? To see if they could get any accusation against Jesus, right? So they asked Jesus, look, we caught this woman in the very act, the very act of committing adultery. And then Moses prescribed that such a situation, the person should be stoned to death. And that is in the Mosaic law in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 22, from verse 22 to 24. Now, the man is not there. The man who was committing that act with this poor woman, right? We can say that the man is not brought upon here for two reasons. First, this is a paterfamilial culture where there is a male dominant society. And then the second one is they're not really interested in stoning this woman. They're not interested in what the woman did. What they're more interested is what Jesus can say so that it will be used against him. At that time, it was the Romans who were governing this territory. So Jesus is in a very tight corner here. On the one hand, if Jesus should say this woman is to be stoned, is guilty, therefore she should be stoned to death, Jesus will be accused of being a rebel, of opposing, of being higher even than the Roman authority. Because under normal circumstances at this state, it is only the Romans who have the right to pass a death sentence on someone. So he will be guilty. On the other hand, if Jesus could say this woman should not be put to death, he will also be accused religiously by opposing the Mosaic law. Therefore, it is also subject that is punishable by death. So Jesus is now placed in a tight corner. And what he did here is silence. Sometimes silence speaks very loud. Jesus didn't say anything at the beginning. He bent and then wrote the new law with his finger. And after Jesus straightened up and asked, is there any one of you here who is without sin? Let that person be the first person to throw a stone. Okay, not this one. All right. To throw a stone on this woman. Now, beginning from the eldest to the youngest, no one was able to do so. Because even though these people are looking for a way to kill Jesus, at least their conscience is still a bit correct. Their conscience is not yet knocked. So they examine their conscience and realize that they are not innocent, that they are also guilty of the same offense they have accused this woman of. And that's why the answer comes. Most of the times, grace of God works deeper. We see that if Jesus could just rely on his words at the beginning, it could have been that he entered more into trouble. But he neither accused this woman nor condemned her. He remained very neutral, and the rest is that the mercy of God surpassed everything. But dear sisters and brothers, there are many lessons that we can learn from this scenario of this woman caught in adultery. First of all, when we are accusing others, when we are throwing stones on others, let us first of all sit and take a look at our personal lives. At the moment we realize that no one is perfect, no one is a saint, then we say, okay, whatever I am saying, let me be conscious that I was once in this particular way. Thus, it will enable me to be merciful. And we can also learn from this that Jesus does not really call us by our sin. It is the devil that calls us by our sin. Remember, when we commit a sin, when we do something wrong, the devil now brings us closer to himself. But the moment we do a righteous act, we draw closer to Jesus. The devil calls us by our sin because when we do something, the devil can use it against us. But Jesus calls us by our name because Jesus hates sin, but he does not hate a sinner. A sinner because it's a transitional state where we can fall and then subsequently rise. Today, there are many ways of throwing stones. Omar not even had the physical stones as planned to be thrown on this woman by the Jews as of that time. But we have verbal stones that we throw on people. We have our words that we usher, that we insult, that we say all sort of none of things on people of which we ourselves can be like victims of the same thing we are saying to others. One thing is when we are not yet caught in act, we pretend to be saints, we claim to be saints, or we are seen to be saints. But the moment we are caught in act, even if it's the first time, we are seen like the devil. We are seen like sinners. My dear friends, there is always a balance in our life. I am not saying that it's good for us to go and start sinning because there is mercy. No. In case we fall, like because of the flesh, and also our own temptations.